Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll, and I've got my main compatriot in making the world a happier, more satisfying, and empowered place, Jan Jeremias. How are you doing today, Jan?
I'm okay, thanks, Bill. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little drained. I've been working for 3 weeks on a new designation, new career, all that good stuff. And so there's a lot of studying that goes along with it, plus the rest of life. It's one of those things that my life was not big enough to handle all of this. I have to come up with new strategies. I have to come up with new places where I say that's enough. I'm done for today on whatever it is. And I'm also feeling kind of up and down in terms of performance. There's a lot of testing that goes along with this. And I'm used to scoring in the 90th percentile or above on anything that I do. There's just too much information. So I think part of me is just having to surrender to the notion of I'm in the middle of it. We'll know next week if it was any good or not, whether I get a passing grade. So the final test for a month's worth of work and study is coming up next Monday.
Okay. And I think I look at that kind of stuff because I realize that, like, especially when I did my yoga teacher training, and people might say, what's to study? But there was a lot to learn because we did yoga philosophy and, a lot of that and a lot of old scriptures. So a lot of the ancient texts and everything. But kind of realizing that it was okay if I didn't know it all right away.
Right.
I was going to learn it over time, which I have. And I still revisit some of those texts because they're epic tales of, so I think it just came to a place much more so than I had been when I was in school, like the first time around. I would say more traditional school, when I was in those college and grad school years, where I kind of felt like, oh my gosh, I've got to know everything. And now I kind of understand that I'm not going to know everything.
Yeah, and I think we're partners. We've never talked about this before, but my wife and I were just chatting the other day. It's like we can't really understand why people are still being forced to memorize things.
Oh, I know.
Because access to the best in the world is being who's got the best question, not who's got the answer. And the whole notion of memorizing something doesn't leave you open to being wrong. Like an inquiry, the answer you give is the answer you've got to give, and that's all the further the answer. And there's no more investigation that goes on after that. So I was saying this back in the 90s when the internet really started to blow up. It was a much better internet then than it is now. The reason for that is that 95% of the content that people see has been truncated, paid for, altered, messed with. It's not objective any longer. It's not like you can go and find anything that you're looking for and be able to use it as a foundation to stand on as if it's true. And that's one of the big problems for the AI, Chat GPT, and those types of things. In the caveat of everything that they give you that has to do with current events, it has to do with market definitions. It has to do with factual information. It says take care to double check important information.
Hmm.
And so what we're really living in right now is a time where people are they're tested, graded, rewarded, punished on their ability to, memorize and regurgitate. And it's not a big part of life. It really isn't. It is, in fact, I think it's a conversation killer to think you know something, right?
I mean, I agree. And I mean, and I, and I'm saying this was my experience. So when I say the next part of it, I'm saying from my personal experience.
Exactly.
So in my personal experience, my original plan was to go to medical school. I was going to go to medical school. I took my MCATs. I was like all set. I decided I wanted to take a year off. I wanted to retake the exam to see if I could get a better score. And I was going to work. So I started to work in research, which wasn't really like I figured I'd do it for 1 or 2 years. It wasn't, I didn't think it was going to be in this career plan.
Right.
But as I started to work in hospital settings and in more traditional medicine, I realized how limited it is because it was really just a whole bunch of memorization of a lot of body systems and a lot of facts.
Yeah.
And it didn't leave a lot of space for creative thinking or from problem solving, even then. And that was a long time ago.
Right.
And so I decided that wasn't the path I wanted to take because I figured like it just seemed at the time like this is so narrow to me. There's no room for innovation. There's no room for, like I said, problem solving because we're not all the same. And even though I wasn't like holistic at the time, I did understand that everybody was different and couldn't be treated the same on a health way, like in a health way.
Yep.
And so I just thought to myself, I don't want to do this. And so I didn't go. And I stayed with the research aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do believe that so much of what you say is true because I think once you memorize everything, I think there's this energy that comes across you that you know everything.
Right.
I know all there is to know about this topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden one day you realize, oh, I really know like as much as it's on a blade of like the one blade of grass, compared to like a whole field of the vast knowledge that's out there.
Yeah. I mean, we're thrown to that. I thought it was hysterical. There was back in 2002, 2003, after the dot-com bubble, when people lost a lot of money, all the ads were starting to change to being internet, interested, if not internet focused. And I thought it was really, really great when this guy said, so the product had to do with fast internet speeds. And he comes out of the office at his home and he goes to the kitchen table and he looks at his wife and he says, I finished the internet. Yeah, it was hysterical. But see that, I don't know, that's what some people do in life is they just try to finish, and that takes away, I think, a lot of the just being where you are, the whole notion of being mindful. If your attention is always on the destination, the journey's not really getting enough attention, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was on. So I mean, kudos to me. So um, my next book contribution is going to be out on Monday, and so we finished it and
Wow.
everything. So we're very excited, and so we sat there and all of us met, and it's 7 of us and wonderful people, and we're all really excited. And one of the women was like last week, she's like, I really want to think about what our next book will be. And so she started, and I said, can we just take a moment and savor what we've done? And which is in a way so not like me. Like that's a new way, a new phrase. Like that's a new experience for me because I've always been the type of person of like, okay, what's next? Okay, that's done. What's next? What's next on the to do list? What's next can I do? And she's always been very slow, like very like life is slow and life is simple. And she comes from a very hot country. So I think that's part of it also. It's just climate wise and everything, but just her energy is very like, and it was so interesting because she's so excited and wants to do the next book. And I'm kind of like, can we pause here for a second and just enjoy what we've done and savor this amazing accomplishment and everything? So it was really funny because I was really like you are, like just this, like trying to be present with it and
Yeah.
not rush to the next thing without actually the experience of actually being with what we were doing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Congratulations on the milestone with the book. Since it's been a year since we published, our co-authorship, uh, it's great to hear this. And I'm imagining that it was a lot more of an intimate experience than we had with our group. That it sounds to me like you interacted with each other on a peer basis, and we on our book we pretty much were interacting through a central point, and we weren't always all getting the same information at the same time and all the rest of that. But it sounds to me like what you guys were doing was cooperating on a co-creation, and informing each other as you went along. And I think if that's the case, you've got a lot to be thankful for. And of course, you should be taking a moment to just appreciate. Appreciation is so undervalued by most people, but the people who use it and the people who invite it into their life, they have like another gear, in terms of another level of love that they're putting out to the world.
well, so two things. One is it was an amazing experience.
Yep.
It was partly because we were a group of we were meeting anyway before, and we were trying to figure out what to do.
Yep.
And it's 7 people who are all like, not everybody, but a lot of 7 of us are like, 6 of us are like coaches of different nationalities, different genders, different ages, and one woman is not. She Yeah, she's a writer basically. I mean, she does a lot of marketing type stuff and everything. But it was kind of interesting. We were all meeting about, because we share a philosophy and like a way to live, and we've been all meeting for like I don't know how many months, and we couldn't decide what to do. We finally decided. I was like, well, why don't we write a book? So we decided to write this book, and we decided what we wanted the book to be basically. And so we each went off and kind of gave ourselves like a soft deadline of when we wanted our chapters to be completed. And then finally we got that done. And then we each read each other's chapters and kind of gave feedback individually to everybody about their chapter. But just like, could you explain this more kind of thing? Very kind, very generous feedback. We had 2 outside people read it, and then we just had a copy editor give it back. And so it's gone through a lot of refinements, like I would say. But it's been this amazing experience, from like the way the cover was created to, I mean, it's just been a beautiful experience. And so I think it was far different than the one we had worked on together. Very different.
Good for you.
And the word that you used, because it was so interesting, I'm doing a program, and we had to talk about values. And I said, the value I wrote down, and I said, is appreciation was one of my values. And it's not a word that's commonly used. And I said, well, because I think of appreciation as being different than gratitude. Like, you can appreciate someone, be grateful for someone. But I said, it's different than gratitude, because to me, appreciation is like a savoring, is like this spending time. It's a deep word. Like, it has a deepness to it, a richness to it.
Yeah. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. We used to, if you remember, maybe we didn't do it so much after you got on the podcast, but we used to use the dictionary a lot. And
we did a little bit in the beginning. I love to do that. Etymology and all that stuff I'm very into. I'm a word nerd.
Yeah, so that's fun, but sometimes, like you said earlier, I'm not saying this is how it really is or what that experience really is, but I'm just saying that that's how it was for me. And what I hear in that is implicit. That's all any of us are ever going to have, is our own experience of whatever it is. Either we're living it, or we're observing it, or we're hearing about it, or we're studying, or whatever. But the term appreciation has, like so many other words in the English language, it has a a moment that you could use synonyms like savoring. You could use, you know, like the financial term appreciate or appreciation has to do with noticing an increase in value from what it was to what it is now. And I kind of like that. If we were to look at our relationships on an appreciation scale, the amount of noteworthiness, how do you like that word, would be in the area of how much has our relationship appreciated. And my active appreciation of that is to take a store of value and in this moment and just kind of like stand back, enjoy it, consume it, be surrounded by it, all those kinds of things, be in it, be mindful of it.
Absolutely. It's, as you use the word, and I think about the word appreciate, because it was this in a conversation, it might have been on my Friday Zoom audio events, was something about and this whole idea of you can experience them, like you can go through the motions and experience something, but there is something where you experience something and it is like where when you're truly present, which is what you're talking about, there is an appreciation of it. There's an increase in value
Yes.
in the benefits that it offers you. Like I've been thinking about that a lot because of just different things I do, which when I'm not aware of them and I just do them, they
Right.
aren't, it's not the same. It's like if I was thinking about it just last night because I got off the phone with my mother and I closed the conversation, how I close the conversation every time I close a conversation with her, which is twice a day because I speak to my mom at least twice a day. And I just said, love you, mom. And then I thought to myself, like, it came out so like just words, like there was whatever. And then I took a moment and I was just like, after I hung up the phone, I was just sitting with the words. It was this feeling of love I infused into those words. And then all of a sudden it went up a few notches, like, or more than a few notches. It was because it created a physiological reaction in me. It created an energetic like response within me. And so all of a sudden I felt like, and how often do we do that throughout our day with just, when we're not present? Like we prepare food, but we're not really paying attention, or we eat food and we don't even pay attention that we ate it. And then all of a sudden we look down and the plate's empty and we're like, oh, I guess I ate, but we don't even remember eating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a remarkable phenomenon. The meals that I eat at home, 90% of them I make myself. Jan makes 90% of the stuff that she eats, and about 10% of the time one of us will cook for both of us. And what I really enjoy is she's got some go-to recipes for really simple comfort food type items. And when I cook, it's usually a roast. It might be a number of different things, but I take the same amount of time to cook for just me as preparing a big meal for the two of us. So between knife work and, prep and sauteing and the steps in terms of building out the plate, typically my meals take about 45 minutes to an hour to prepare. They take less time at a restaurant than they do for me.
Mm-hmm.
You put your order in and usually 10, 15 minutes later, you got everything on your plate. But not so here. So especially when I have the knife, I kind of have to be paying attention. I every once in a while I will notice, hey, I wasn't really looking at that. I came pretty close to slicing the end of my finger off.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I mean, we can have that we can have that presence no matter what we're doing, or lack of presence.
Yes.
And so with that whole idea of appreciation is and it's not a word that I normally use that much. And then, like, in the past 3 days, of course, it's come up in, like, I don't know how many conversations. And I really do like that whole idea of, like, I was thinking of that, more financial term about it, and appreciate it, and like appreciating in value, because that's the way I feel. Like, when you appreciate something, no matter what it is, then all of a sudden it holds more value for you.
Yes. Yeah. The word appreciation has a positive and a negative effect for me. There's a yin and a yang there, where, for instance, last night I had cooked a cut of meat about 2 months ago, and it was so tough. I mean, I literally put it in the sous vide for like 18 hours. And when it came out, it really wasn't tender. I've never seen that happen before. This was just one tough piece of meat. So I decided what I would do with it. I marinated it. I marinated it for about 4 or 5 days, and then I sliced it up, and then I froze the slices and vacuum sealed them. And so last night I had the last little bit of that. It was teriyaki steak. And what I noticed about it is it didn't taste like teriyaki anymore. I could really taste kind of a vinegariness to it. And I chose in the moment, first of all, it was a little off-putting to me. I didn't expect it. It tasted different than what I had anticipated. And then I thought, well, no, maybe this is exactly how this is supposed to taste. Let's try that on for a minute and see if I can actually find something good to say about it. And I did. There was, a release of flavor layers that the one that I first tasted would then change into, more smoky, and then a little bit more of the teriyaki flavor. And then finally a little bit of a saltiness to it, but like the right amount of saltiness. And that tough piece of meat, which after my first bite was, boy, do I have what it takes to choke the rest of this down, or, to where I actually talked myself through. So what's good about it, And that was kind of a fun inquiry.
I mean, I love that, because what you're bringing up is this idea to me of what we expect versus what we get.
Yes.
And that is, that's, it's so interesting, because I think that I find that if I can get my yoga students, if we're doing a pose, to get beyond the actual pose,
Right.
and not get stuck on whether they can do that pose or not, then it becomes an appreciation for, like, whatever part of the body they're opening, whatever they feel. And then it has a different kind of value and a different appreciation. It might not be what you might have thought it was going to be,
Yeah.
but you're then open to a different experience than you also thought. Because by thinking that you thought that steak was going to be whatever, limited, whatever, to what you thought it was going to be,
Right.
but it became probably even more so because of the, what you had to do. And then the fact that all of a sudden you had all those nuances of flavors, and that you probably, had it been just what it was typically supposed to be, it
Right.
would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, I taste that.
Yeah. I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to cooking in general, but especially when it comes to the doneness of meat, because I appreciate the sacrifice that the animal has made. I don't feel quite the same reverence towards the vegetables on my plate, but I definitely do honor the animal. And it breaks my heart going out to a restaurant and seeing how people will order a very expensive cut of meat and ask for it well done. And this is a conversation between me and the folks at home, because I know you haven't been a meatitarian for a very long time. But the point of it, those of us who are uh, that we eat that kind of stuff in our diet, if you really are going to be an honorable human being, then it's the final. It's kind of like the final stage in the life cycle of a whole lot of different foods coming together on one plate. So being mindful of the plate, noticing the color, the smells, the textures, there's steam coming off of it. Is there, juice coming out of the broccoli, or, whatever. It's just, it's kind of wonderful every 24 hours to have an event called dinner as a celebration, right?
Uh, I mean, I love the way you describe that honoring, because I think that no matter what you get, and maybe, whether you're religious or not religious or practicing any sort of religion, in a lot of religions or practices, there is a formal like acknowledgement of the food that you've received,
Yes.
where you actually pause and maybe say a blessing or a thank you. And that could be just in your head, like where you yourself to yourself say thank you for this food.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to mean that you're affiliated with any particular religious sect. um there is something to me of the realization of recognizing that this food came from sources, from even the people who grew it, and cultivated the land, to the harvesters, to the to the shippers, to the people who put it on the shelves so that it's in the store or whatever. There's a lot of hands that go into bringing food to your plate
Yes.
or into your home.
Yeah.
And so that whole idea of acknowledging all those people who are responsible for this food I am now eating.
Yeah. I love that enhancement to what I was saying, because it makes it a shared phenomenon that goes farther than my refrigerator or my kitchen in the grocery store. It takes in all of the people that I will never know who they are or their stories. But guess what? They're just like you and me. They've got lives that they go to every single day. They've got challenges. They've got things that are working and not working. I'll bet you some of them are sitting home right now with their leg up because they broke their ankle. There's it's all out there.
That's right. And I do think that there is so much we don't take the time to, we talk about appreciate, of all the people or all the things involved in getting you, or you know getting that food to your plate. And it makes it a little bit more people centric, I guess is a good word,
Sure.
to which for a moment I wasn't sure that was a word, but I'm making it a word if it's not.
No, I think it's a good term.
That it brings the, like you said, you realize that, oh my gosh, the people that pick this plant, they have families, and they're trying to put food on the table, and they have concerns and worries and joys, just like I do, loss, whatever it is, it's all.
Yeah, while you're talking, my mind is kind of really, really drifting for a moment. And I'm taking into consideration, the people that do things that they have to do, not because they want to, but it's for survival, or it's a situation where, maybe they don't have real freedom in their life. Um, and it goes far beyond just, enjoying and appreciating a meal. It's like, if you live that kind of life, and I'm not saying people should or ought to or anything like that, but if you do, you live a life where you can generally find what's appreciable in every moment. It's like, how much joy do you think a human being can stand? You know? And the other part of it is that why wouldn't you at least stroke yourself every once in a while by just having an amazing experience out of the mundane ordinary?
And I think that when you do, it was interesting over the past like month, where a lot of the things I've been going through. So I was literally in bed and I sat there, and it happens to be that I have a spectacular view from my bedroom window. I mean, spectacular. And so I'm sitting there And I'm thinking to myself, I could be laying here and looking at a brick building somewhere
Yeah.
or an alley. And I'm here laying, looking out at this green grass with this small pond and a fountain with this typical New England background of like a white church in the distance. And I'm like, this is a pretty amazing place to have to look out on.
Yeah.
And I think that from your surroundings to, um, if you can, and it's not, I mean, and there are days that it's hard to see that even when you try,
Yes.
or it just doesn't seem to be enough. But then there are days where it can totally shift you out. And if you're even navigating, let's say, and you're feeling pretty good, it even puts you even further, like, so you're feeling even better.
Yeah.
And I think that it's what we all need. And then also because we always close with the people in our lives. And I think that we just have to recognize that just to appreciate people.
And sometimes the verbal act of appreciation is just such a huge demonstration of love, the generosity that is displayed when you take the time. When you were speaking about your magnificent view, it reminded me of a story that I can't attribute right at the moment, but it goes something like this. There were two men that were in a hospital room, and one guy was in a body cast in traction, and he couldn't look right or left. And then there was another guy that was, in a bed over by the window. And the guy in the body cast said, I can't get up. I can't move. I can't look out the window. Would you do me a favor? Just look out there and describe what you see. And so the man described this beautiful sunset with birds flying across the sky and with the lake, where you could see all of these diamonds glistening and so on, and in such loving detail to this man. It was just so generous of him. Well, that was such a success. They started doing it every day. And they would, at a particular time, they both would get excited. And this went on for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden, the man next to the window passes. And the man who is in the body cast gets removed from the body cast. And he goes over and he looks, he says to the nurse, what happened to Bob? She said, well, unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. She said, boy, I'm really going to miss his description of what's going on outside this building. And he gets up for the first time in weeks, and he walks over to the building, and it's a brick wall, just like you described.
I love that story. I knew where it was going, and I thought that is such a great story.
And so he says to the nurse again, boy, what an imagination he had. She says, you don't know the half of it. He was blind. So everything he described was not only in his mind's eye, but he literally couldn't see the brick wall. So as far as he was concerned, what he was talking about was really out there.
Was real. I love that. That's a great story.
Yeah.
It was, it was interesting because I think I shared last week that I had to write this description. We had to write about somebody we admire.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because as we met yesterday, and I was talking to one of the guys who's in the program, who's actually from Portugal, and we were both talking about how we had originally thought about writing about somebody famous, but then that just didn't seem to fit for me anyway. And he shared the same sentiment because it was kind of like, I wanted to write about somebody I knew who I admired, like that, because I know them. So I know more about their life and who they are versus someone who I know from, let's say, media, from the internet, from, even their books. Like, I don't know who they are. Like, and so we each had written about friends. And I think I mentioned that I shared what I wrote with a friend of mine. I wrote about her and I shared it with her afterwards. and her saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you see me this way because this is not how I see myself at all." you
Right.
know, and how that whole idea of like what you describe of like, can we reflect back to people something that's beyond like like that's beyond the surface, like so here it was, this blind man who could see beyond, like who could see in a way probably that people who can see can't even see. You know
Right.
what I mean? I think that made sense.
Yeah.
Who had a vision or an ability to see that which was purely in his imagination.
Yeah.
And how we can do the same for each other. Like, I mean, we can help someone see beyond what's happening. Maybe, and that could be helping someone if something challenging happens. And that happened, for a friend of mine yesterday.
Yes.
And she was the brunt of some not unkind language, or unkind emails. And to just even say that, like to someone, this is not about you. This is really something to do with them. Whatever it is that they have going on, you're in the fire, like you're at the moment getting hit, but really this isn't anything that you've done. And so just even to be able to encourage people on that one, like to let them see beyond what's happening.
Yeah. While you're speaking, words like magnanimous and generosity and just plain being thoughtful. But the interesting thing is we do not give enough credit to the power of our words that we use with people, and
Mm.
how we can both incredibly raise them up or conversely knock them down. And the thing that comes to mind the most, the whole Pygmalion story and My Fair Lady, and have you ever heard the story of the 8 cows?
I'm not sure.
Well, there was, I think the story goes something like, somewhere in India there was a very wealthy man who had decided it was time for him to take a mate. And typically, when you married into a family, the man would give, it wasn't a dowry that you got from the from the father or the bride. You typically would give him some livestock, a goat or a cow or something. And a cow was really big because they could feed the family with milk and cheese products for the rest of the cow's life. Well, everybody in the world were trooping their daughters in front of this guy. All the people that the well-to-do, the high heeled or well-heeled young ladies, and he just wasn't interested. So he went out and he found a village. He just was walking around, and all of a sudden he met this man who's, "What are you so happy about?" He asked him. He said, "Well, it's the joy of being the father of 7 beautiful daughters, and of course one is an ugly duckling." He said, "But you can't win them all." And so the wealthy man said, "I'm intrigued. May I have dinner at your house tonight?" And so the guy says, "Absolutely. We're poor, but you're welcome to come and share a meal with us." So he goes and he meets the beautiful girls, and they are beyond beautiful. The father was just not giving them enough plugs. And all of a sudden, the girl who was playing came out of the back part of the house and walks in to sit down. And he says to that girl, he says, "Would you be kind enough to sit next to me? I'd like to talk with you." So they do, and he talks with everyone, and they're all asking him questions. But by the time the night's over, he says to the father, he says, "I've made my choice." The father says, "Which one is it? Is the eldest? She's good at everything." And he says, "No, it's not the eldest." He says, "Well, how about the youngest?" And he says, "No, I'm not too concerned about that either. He says, you know, the one that you described as being the ugly duckling, the plain one? I'd like to give you 8 cows for her. And I'm probably going to break down, but so they have this, they get married in the style of the family in the village. And then he retires back to his home. The father of this girl comes about 6 years later, and he says to the man, what have you done? My daughter is radiant. She bears no resemblance to the girl who I raised. And he said, I just treated her as if she weren't worth the 8 cows. And I tell her daily, I would not be married to anyone who was worth less than 8 cows.
I love it.
Yeah.
Just so you know that when I was traveling at one point, I had somebody from a specific country offer 3 camels and a donkey for me.
Oh, you go. That's funny.
Yes.
Oh.
I was Rachel from the Bible.
Yeah.
So it was at Rachel's grave. And we were outside getting in, like we got off the bus or whatever, and we're going into the shrine of the memorial of where she is buried and tombed. And somebody offered the group 3 camels and a donkey for me.
Now, and I bet you there were a couple of takers. There probably 3 camels and a donkey. Well, can you actually maybe throw in a peacock or 2? We'll make this a deal.
So yeah, but I love that story, and I had not heard it. So that's a really beautiful story. But I agree with you. I don't think we place enough value on what we say and how we say it to people. And I think with technology, it's gotten even worse. Yeah. And we've spoken about this before, because I find myself, like, every now and then, like, I'll send someone a message without any hello, how are you, without anything. And then all of a sudden I'll think to myself, like, how rude. Like, it's just, I'm just like, but we get so used to, we talk about moving fast and not savoring.
Right.
We get so used to, like, oh, I've got to text so-and-so, and we want to mark it off our to-do list or whatever we have going on. And then all of a sudden we realize that we've come out, and there's no sense of humanity in it at all. Right. Of recognizing that this person is a person. And I think I feel like it gives people permission to act and say things that they would never say to a person if they looked them in the eyes.
I agree with you. I think that's a really dark side of internet communications, emails, online chat rooms, all that sort of thing. They have an effect of objectifying people. That means thingifying them. Like they're not people anymore. They're just things. And that's why people are very, very uncareful about how they talk to and about people, and especially people that are not there to defend themselves. I've seen those kind of behaviors, like you said, from upstanding, well-heeled people of means who would never do that face to face. But you put them at a keyboard, in a chat room or on X or something like that, they become so dehumanized.
Absolutely. And I think it's very, like, there's this feeling of disconnect, that you're communicating, but you're really not communicating with the person. Like, I'm communicating with your phone, is this kind of feeling. Like, my phone is communicating with your phone, but there's no people on the ends to those phones.
Right.
And there is this total ability, if you're not careful, to forget that, oh my gosh, there's a person on the other end of this, that's sending me this message.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, I think that there's a whole element of communication which we've talked about before, which has just become lost. And it just also becomes very easy to, I think, have like to say things that we would never say.
Well, I think it transforms from giving information to getting a response and then actually performing. Like you're going to get validated and you're going to get encouraged to do even worse things by somebody who thinks it's funny. But and people don't realize that when they're using terms that dehumanize other people, it says more about the person speaking than it does about anybody else.
Hmm.
And I don't think people are they may be intimidated that they don't want to have that person turn on them. But I don't think people who are really nasty do themselves any favors. They don't really make it easier to be around.
It was interesting because, Bill, the wonderful Mary Jane, and Mary Jane and I were having a conversation because a week ago Friday we read this poem, and the poem had a swear in it, and neither of us use that kind of language on a, basically on a, I mean, every now and then, but it's not language we use. Now I have friends who speak very colorfully, like, and every other word that comes out of their mouth is, but that's not me. And so we have this, because the audio is at 9 a.m. and we usually open with the poem like 5 minutes after we start. The two of us are sitting there. Mary Jane usually reads the poems, and she's like, I don't know if I can read this at 9 a.m.
So it was a poem that the two of you had read before and knew what was in it, or
Yeah, we read it between the two of us because we plan our Friday audio and Zoom events. So we found a poem, and so we really kind of fit in with the theme, and in it there was a swear word, and it was a great poem. And she's like, well, do I say it? Do I say, do I just say F instead of the whole full word? I said, just say how you feel. Like, if you don't feel like you can say it, then don't. I said, we always put up the original, so if people want what's actually written, they can get it. And it wasn't, but it was just kind of funny when you talk about language and the fact that we were both like sitting there, because it's not this language that we normally use in a conversation or we would use to speak about. And so now lately we've been sharing all these things about like profanity. And so she sent me this meme the other day it just said, I never realized adulting would just be a whole lot of coffee and a whole lot of swearing.
yep.
And we just both cracked up. I mean, it was just so funny because it was like neither of us do, but we all have moments where we do.
Well, it went from really being taboo when I was growing up. Kids didn't get to use that kind of language, and as a matter of fact, corporal punishment was meted out regularly, for that sort of thing. Then as we got older, my mother became the worst. I mean, she was like a mule skinner, sometimes, but the people that she hung out with were different. They weren't the same kind of people as when we were being raised. But the funny part of it is that it went from being taboo to fitting in language, like, to be part of that culture, wherever you are. I mean, if you're not dropping an F-bomb every other word in the middle of the Bronx, you might get beat up, like, what's wrong with you? The other part of it is it's kind of sloppy speaking. It's, choosing to use a crutch phrase, any crutch phrase. And I think swearing, is kind of like saying or ah, or, or, but at the end of the day, I think, again, to demonstrate appreciation means looking for language that approximates how you feel. And sometimes there's no substitute for that word, but not every other word.
Right. Right. And I agree, and sometimes there is no substitute.
Yeah.
And, and so you sit there and there's like, and it comes out because it's almost like there is no substitute. But I don't look at it as being, I agree with you. And I loved what you said about language. It's almost like this lazy way of speaking.
Yes.
Where I don't really have to spend time thinking about what word to use or what word's appropriate. So therefore, I'll just use something that, to fill space, basically.
I think that's it. And it's not listenable. However, if everybody's doing it, everybody's doing it, right?
And I agree with you as far as timing, because I remember the days that maybe it wasn't core, but I remember getting my mouth washed out with soap a few times for using words that I shouldn't have used. And at one point, I thought it was extremely cool. And my brother's telling me I spoke like I was like I worked on the docks or I was a tree, kind of thing. And it wasn't nice or whatever. But that faded, like I think I did that more for that sort of sensationalist, draw attention kind of thing, and as, just to stand out. And then got to the point where I'm just like, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to um, add anything to a conversation to me. So
So here's the thing. You's in charge of you. So
that's right.
yeah, you get to pick and choose now, and you also get to pick and choose who you want to be around. And
Absolutely.
I don't know. There's been a couple of times, especially in my adulthood, where I've taken somebody aside and said, "Look, um, I think that language, in this group is maybe just a little bit too familiar. It might be something that you could do one on one with somebody, and it would not be inappropriate. But we're in mixed company, and then the guy says something like, "Well, the women swear worse than I do." So, and I said, "Yeah, that might be true, but if it's not true right now, why lower yourself to a standard that may not actually be a truth at all?" So when I think anything that's delivered with love, people will get it. And if it's not delivered with love, I think we learn face to face where the boundaries are, what you can say to somebody that's going to get you punched in the nose, or what you can say to somebody that's going to get you a hug, right? And you deliver the same message, but you do it in a different way with a different set of terms and a different demeanor.
I mean, I've done the same thing. I've actually, because I have a few friends that speak very colorful, whatever. You know what I mean? Full of color. Not I use a lot of words that I wouldn't use. And and to me, when I'm in, especially like in a business, a professional type setting, I don't think it's appropriate at all.
Right.
And I will say to them, we're meeting with people like that I don't think are going to respond well to those kind of words.
Right.
Can you please, like, I would refrain if I were you from using them, because I think if you're looking to collaborate, or if you're looking for, any sort of, collaboration, anything that you wish maybe might come out of this conversation, I think it might shut it down. And so, and I have said that to people, because
Right.
I do think that there are settings that it just isn't appropriate. It's not like I'm speaking to my buddy and we're speaking about, I don't know, something. I mean, and then all of a sudden I use a word that's not appropriate.
Yeah.
It's a professional study setting, but I always felt like that, because I think there's stuff that, I don't know, I think where language is important. And I think how you use words and what you say is, can either like open the open up the energy and open up the path, or shut it down really quickly.
Yes. Yeah. I think our culture has um, not benefited from several things that happened since the 1990s. I think one of them, with the internet being wide open, and with so much social media, and now with so much um, content, television shows, movies, all that sort of thing, that are not coming over a FCC regulated three letter network, um, and then with certain kinds of music, especially inner city rap music, having almost like a baseline beat of f bombs. It's kind of numbed people to what we used to call common decency, and it's not intended to be that way, because how the artists express themselves, um, in many cases, was to have a song or a rap uh, beat that they're letting people know that they're angry. They're letting people know that they're upset at the world, and they're protesting the unfairness of all of it. And that's the best they can do, to really approximate their feelings. But unfortunately, it kind of leaks over into where all they're doing is trying to sell something. So I think there's a bit too much of it out there, and there's a bit too much of a few other things as well. But they say that the pendulum always swings too far out to the right and then all to the center for a while, and then too far out to the left. And I don't know. We might be seeing what's called a reactionary period, where the kids that are coming of age now, they don't want it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There was a television show where Michael J. Fox played a character. He was a 12-year-old conservative that always wore a tie and a suit, Alex P. Keaton. And I think we're getting a generation of kids that give a good rap. I think they're interested in figuring out how they can have a piece of the American dream. And in a lot of cases, it's because their parents spent most of their young adulthood in their parents' basements between 2005 and 2020. But now that next generation of kids, they're all turning 17 and 18 years old. They're basically going, yeah, we didn't have a whole lot. We rented the whole time that we were growing up. I'd kind of like to buy a house. I'd kind of like to save some money. Maybe I'll be the first one to have generational wealth, in my family. But there's all of that goes on. And I think in the meantime, again, what you're hearing from me is my social commentary, and it's not making a difference, the conversation that we're having right now, until it gets listened to by somebody else and it makes a difference for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's why we record these things.
Right. That's right. Well, hopefully something that's said is all of a sudden you go out and you just have a realization or aha moment about something that you do, or all of a sudden you notice,
Right.
Within yourself, and you're like, oh, I do, I should think about this more, because I send texts every day and I don't really pay attention to how I say that, what I say. Or I gave a workshop on Saturday, Illuminate Kindness. And so we were talking about just common courtesies, the common courtesy of a smile to somebody, or a thank you, or the common things that you grew up with and I grew up with. I mean, you didn't go into a store, you didn't go into anywhere without saying please for something and thank you when you left. Even if you didn't say hello and good morning, it was you always said, please, could you hand me that? Or please, and thank you so much when you left. Always. And if you didn't, then you would have also gotten some form of reprimand in some way, even if it was just a verbal reprimand of saying you should what do you say? That was my that was my parents. All you had to do was forget once. If you asked for something my mother would say, what'd you say? And then you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Please, can you pass me that?
Yeah, I think my parents tried talking to all of us when we were small, but it didn't work. So we degenerated into a long period of corporal punishment. It was that old story about the guy hitting his horse in the head with a 2x4, and the guy next to him says, "What'd you do that for?" He said, "Well, I had to get his attention first." Anyhow,
but either way, there was but the point was that that wasn't acceptable.
Right.
It wasn't acceptable to not acknowledge someone in some way, to go in and just expect something without a please, a thank you.
Right.
Just it wasn't acceptable. And even to this day, if I spend time with my nieces and nephews' kids and they don't say please and thank you, I'm like, what do you say?
Yeah.
because it bothers me. I'm like, there should be those things.
I think that's setting a good example. And you get so little time with young people. I mean, I don't know how much time you get, but I don't get anywhere near what I would call making a difference time with my grandchildren. So when I am around them and I see a behavior that I know is inappropriate for them, I'll let them know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll also let them know that I love them, and I also let them know that they have a choice the next time.
No,
Well, we did it again.
Did it again?
We did it again. So, would you like to do like kind of a little bit of a wrap on what we talked about today, so we can put a little cherry on top?
It's just think about what you say and how you say it. And we talked about appreciation, and I think one of the most important, and I'm not saying that this in a bad way, but one of the most important things, and I don't want to use the word things, so I'm going to say like commodities are one of the most important things in the world are people.
Yeah.
And so just remember that. I have a poem I'd love to close with, Bill.
Awesome.
I'm just going to pull it up. Hold on a second. But as we were talking, I'm like, I really want to share that poem. Oh, yeah. It's called Smiling is Infectious by Spike Milligan.
Nice.
Smiling is infectious. You catch it like the flu. When someone smiled at me today, I started smiling too. I passed around the corner and someone saw my grin. When he smiled, I realized I'd passed it on to him. I thought about that smile, then I realized its worth. A single smile just like mine could travel round the earth. So if you feel a smile begin, don't leave it undetected. Let's start an epidemic quick and get the world infected.
Wow. Yeah. Talk about a positive infection. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Bill.
You're very welcome. I think, no, I'll just do it. Folks, we give you homework every week, and that is when you're done listening to this, would you please just reach out to somebody that you love and let them know that the world works, your world works because they're in it. And if they ever need you, no matter how little or how much, that you're available and all they have to do is call. I think that'll go a long way towards making this world a little bit better place and maybe introducing a little bit more civility and a sense of people having some value, you know? Whether it does or it doesn't, would you just please all do it for me?
Absolutely.
And I think that brings our podcast for today to a close. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll, and you are? And Jeremias. All right. Bye-bye for now, y'all.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.